now have we have 7 members of the board, and so 1 more than the necessary quorum. So I'm going to call this meeting to order at 1:07 p.m. and ask Tony to verify a meeting quorum.
I will do that.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry.
I can verify that there is a quorum present.
Okay, thank you. So for item 3, matters subsequent to posting the agenda, I'd like to bring up something. Subsequent to the board agenda being published last week, we received communication from members in the public, and specifically there was a request that item 6B be tabled to a future meeting. And given the importance of this item and the fact that we've been talking about this item for several months, and that I believe we may be close to a resolution of the ad hoc committee's work, I'm going to ask for a motion from a board member to table this item. And Tony, would you help me with what that motion would sound like?
Stiles?
Yeah, I'll help out that.
Sorry,
So
it's Brittany.
since we don't have a specific process in place to remove agenda items, we are going to ask, in order to facilitate moving this item, that we get a motion and a vote from the board to approve a revised agenda, which would be the agenda as it is with the removal of item 6B. And we're recommending this process just to be as open and transparent as possible in removing this item.
This is Nick Chassett. I would like to make a motion to revise the agenda to remove item 6B.
I'll second that.
Okay, and so with the motion and second, we can move forward with a roll call vote. Central Coast
Is there
Community.
no opportunity for comment? Chair?
Yeah, we can ask the board if they have any comments, but I'll just note that we want to keep it to this, not get into the content of the item, because then we will be essentially putting it back on the agenda. So go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you. I just wanted to flag for my fellow board members that San Francisco's approval process for the long duration storage agreement, requires me to get information in. I'm anxious in advance of most of the rest of you. I am anxious for this item that's being tabled to be heard again no later and finalized no later than October 20th, our next noticed meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me ask, any other board members have any comments on process? Okay, let's go to a roll call vote.
Okay, thank you for that. So Central Coast Community Energy, I believe it's absent. Clean Power San Francisco,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy.
Chris, would you please promote Zach? Thank you.
Give him a minute for him to join the panelist side. Okay, San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to approve the revised agenda passes.
Thank you, Brittany. The next item on the agenda 4 is public comment. Any member of the public may address the board of directors concerning any matter not on the agenda. I see one hand up. Alex Landsberg.
Hi, everybody. This is Alex Landsberg with the San Francisco Electrical Construction Industry. Thank you for continuing the prior item per our request. I did want to repeat what we said to Barbara a couple of days ago, that regarding the long duration storage project, the policies that this board adopted, I think, were in keeping with so much of what we had talked about. We made a commitment to support the project moving forward and not let the absence of CCA, JPA wide policy stand in the way of moving forward the long duration project. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Just let you know that we look forward to continuing to work with staff and board members over the next few weeks to refine and finalize this, finalize the policy. In the past week and a half or so, we've made a lot of contact, sort of reestablished contact with folks in the environmental justice community. I'm not sure if they will be jumping on to speak. They were just going to say to request the continuance today, but I think we'll be pulling them in and make sure that this policy is really reflective of all the stakeholders that have been involved so far. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is Barbara Stebbins, and I'll just make a note that those members of the public who may want to comment on item 6B, this would be the place to comment on it if you want to, or you can save your comments for the next meeting, but we're not going to be discussing this item as a board at this meeting. So the next person who has their hand up is Barbara Stebbins, followed by Jessica Tovar.
This is Barbara Stebbins. I work with East Bay Clean Power Alliance and Local Clean Energy Alliance. I am appreciative that you have moved this item off the agenda for today, item 6B. But I will say it kind of short circuits hearing from the public to do so. So hopefully we will be given an opportunity to comment in full on this item before the item is considered by the board. Thank you.
Jessica Tovar next, followed by Rick Berennier.
Hello, this is Jessica Tovar of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And yeah, thank you for moving item 6B to next month. That was certainly one of the requests of the community. And I just want to highlight one of the issues has been really around transparency and working with stakeholders, and particularly around labor issues, of which I want to just, also uplift that California could be doing better moving into this clean energy economy that we have been dreaming up for decades now. And certainly doing that right, utilizing aggregation and collaborative procurement to actually strengthen the job opportunities that would come through community choice. So I do want to emphasize that. And just to highlight also, again, really the importance of community being part of really the policies that are being put in place and the implementation as well. Because we have a real huge opportunity moving into this next generation of actually creating clean energy jobs that are dignified, that are well paid, family sustaining, as well as creating the infrastructure of resilience that our community needs now more than ever, living in this time of mega wildfires, bizarre weather patterns. And there's so many storms that our communities are going to be facing that we need to weather. And certainly energy resilience is at the center of our survival. So I just want to emphasize that And really what we're talking about is equity in clean energy and having access for communities of color or environmental justice communities throughout California. That's where we need to start first, as our communities are bearing the brunt of climate change and this global pandemic first and worst. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Rick Berennier, followed by Colin Miller.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say thank you for listening to the request for tabling and moving this item 6B to another calendar, be it the next agenda, that whatever it is. But additionally, I want to say that I wholeheartedly endorse and support everything that I just heard with all the other public commenters. And so with that, I'll conclude my comments. Thank you.
Next is Colin Miller, followed by Melissa Yu.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Colin Miller, and I'm a senior associate with Environmental Justice Solutions, and I reside in Wiyot Homelands, which is in Humboldt County, Redwood Coast Energy Authority service territory. And I'm speaking today from my experience in working as an advocate of community choice aggregation and energy democracy for well over a decade, but also most recently in my professional capacity, working in partnership with EBCE on their Connected Communities pilot program to help design and implement meaningful solutions to utility debt and disconnections. And I want to really lift up that work and the work that Jessica Tovar from Local Clean Energy Alliance spoke about in terms of the opportunity that California Community Power has to really advance a just transition in partnership with and centering the leadership of environmental justice communities, indigenous communities, Black communities, immigrant and refugee communities, low-income communities of color who are most impacted both by climate disruption, poverty, pollution, and energy inaffordability, and really also want to acknowledge the importance of working together with organized labor. And we have an opportunity here to advance a just transition, which includes both low-income and EJ communities as well as labor unions to work together to advance the just transition to energy democracy and a renewable powered future. Thank you for listening to environmental labor and environmental justice communities to table agenda item 6B. And I do support a community advisory committee going forward to ensure transparency. Thank you.
Melissa Yu.
Hi, my name is Melissa Yu, and I am with the Sierra Club. I'm going to keep my comments short because a lot has already been said. I just wanted to state on record that we are appreciative that you have continued, that this item will be continued to this meeting so we can allow for additional stakeholder engagement. Thank you.
Next is Jim Lutz, followed by Brett Garett.
Yeah, Jim Lutz here. I'm with the Local Clean Energy Alliance and one of the first residential customers of East Bay Community Energy. And I wanted to support the IBEW letter, the PLA requirements, a bidding preference for projects located within the CCA territories, and a public advisory committee so we don't get stumped with things like this again, and a prohibition on the development of projects that rely on unbundled renewable energy credits. So again, thank you for the time and thank you for continuing this, and I hope you definitely consider the IBEW points. Thank you.
Brett Garrett.
Good morning. This is Brett Garrett. I'm a customer of Central Coast Community Energy. I just want to urge you to improve the labor policy in response to the concerns from the labor unions. As we work to promote clean energy, it's incredibly important to have labor unions on our side, both because it's the right thing to do to, to do whatever we can for the workers, and also because we really need to do everything we can to ensure that labor unions will support clean energy. They're a very powerful voice, and historically, sometimes they feel threatened by clean energy because clean energy is not taking good enough care of the workers. So please take their concerns seriously. Thank you very much.
I see no other requests from the public for public comment on, I see one more. Audrey Ikanos, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. To be followed by Tom Enslow.
Thank you. I joined late, but I have heard all the things that the previous speakers have said, and I wholeheartedly support them. I really appreciate the idea of inclusiveness. I know because of all our environmental crisis, we need to move rapidly, and I appreciate that, but we also have to move together. Everybody has to be on the same page. So thank you for tabling this agenda item. I didn't identify myself. I live in Berkeley, and I am a member of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Thank you very much.
Thomas Enslow. You would unmute yourself and speak.
Yes, I was muted. I apologize. Tom Enslow with the law firm Adams, Brado, Joseph and Cardozo on behalf of the IBEW locals representing workers in the counties of San Francisco, San Mateo, Alameda, and Santa Barbara. I'd like to thank the board for continuing this matter. I think we're getting close, but we want to make sure this is done right, not quickly. We already have policies for the long duration storage project, so we can afford to take a little more time to get this done right. I'd like to specifically thank Mr. Haynes and the subcommittee members for their hard work on this and their frank conversations on these matters. I think that the one, we sent a letter yesterday that set forth our specific kind of concerns that need to be addressed still. But the one message I'd like to leave, I think it would be helpful before this goes back to the full board for the subcommittee to hold a public Zoom workshop, particularly on this matter, so they can hear from all stakeholders. We have been talking directly with Mr. Haynes and some of the board members, but we know that Sierra Club and all these other members have concerns as well, and we want to make sure that everyone has their voice heard before a final policy is brought before the board. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any more comments from the public, so we'll bring the discussion back to the board, and we are going to item number 5, the consent agenda, where we only have one item, the minutes. Any members of the board want to remove this from consent? And if not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll move we approve the minutes.
Matthew Marshall, RCA.
I can second that.
Jeff Cipher, Sonoma, second. Any discussion? Okay, can we get a vote, Brittany?
Okay. Central Coast Community Energy, absent. Clean Power San Francisco.
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy. I believe he is now absent.
And Brittany, I see Nick on the screen. I think he's just muted.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Why don't we move on and then come back?
Okay. Marin Clean Energy.
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Okay, and going back, East Bay Community Energy. Okay. No response, but the consent agenda passes.
Matthew, did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the item number 4 as far as some of the requests about moving forward on the policy development, and are we referring the comments that came into the ad hoc committee as far as some of the requests that were made?
Yes,
Okay.
the ad hoc committee is still alive, and they are going to be dealing with this with under the leadership of the general manager too. And then I think we'll have Tony Braun involved too. So we want to bring this to a discussion on possible approval to the board very shortly.
I just wanted to acknowledge that there was specific requests, and that we were not ignoring those. We were sending them to the committee, if that's okay.
Thank you, Matthew, for clarifying. Appreciate it. All right, we are now on item 6. We'll go to item 6A. So I'll kick this off. It's a report, an informational update on the LDS project approval. So the board has created an ad hoc committee that consists of Lori San Jose, Mitzias, Valley, and myself. We met with the general manager, general counsel, chief negotiator to talk about where we are on this project. Pleased to note that we are entering the final lap. I can say that we have 2 projects ready to go, and we are looking at the first project coming through the board with the notice provisions in October, and Tony is going to go through the entire timeline of how we're going to, following all the JPA protocols from October right through, hopefully getting signatures from all the members by February of 2022. I'll note that the 2 projects that are in the pipeline are both California projects and both have PLAs. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Tony to take us through this presentation.
Thank you, Girish. So this is a very quick outline of the process that we're intending to use. This is a living document. A lot of it, I think, we have well socialized with the Project Oversight Committee, but we are taking additional steps to socialize it with the members and make sure that we're consulting with your general counsels, particularly on the process and approval discussions, as well as bring in not just your contracts team, but your general counsels and others on key commercial terms, just to educate and make sure everyone's aware of the totality of the package. And as Girish indicated, we think that there's one project that is more mature than the other as far as where we're at in the negotiations with the developer. And so that's why we're choosing to move forward in that fashion. Seemed to make sense. Next slide, Chris. So what triggers this discussion is a provision in the Joint Powers Agreement, which requires 60-day notice by the board before any action on a project can be considered. The provision is just that simple, almost. It doesn't provide, for example, what documentation goes with that notice. Obviously, the underlying intent was to ensure that the members had a notice of what the JPA was doing, and we weren't, we were moving forward in a transparent and deliberative fashion. So we are filling in the blanks of this general language, and you'll see some of the details that we're going to bring here, what we're proposing, what we're thinking about. As we already indicated, that this notice is intended to cover one project. Next slide, Chris. So the next 2 slides are just general background. The basic contractual structure that we are looking at here is an energy storage services agreement, and the parties to that agreement are the seller and CC Power. And like any other storage agreement or PPA, it has the key performance terms in it. It's just that the direct parties are the seller and CC Power, and not the seller and the individual members. It also contains an appendix, which are the credit, the separate guarantee terms, which do run between the project participants and the sellers. And that is obviously CC Power is not an entity that has assets or other things that would guarantee performance. And then we're going to have a project agreement, and that project agreement is going to be among the project participant members and CC Power, and that's going to have the terms associated with the committee structures and others that determine how projects are managed, and the rights and obligations and flow of monies and invoices and things like that. And then since this will be a grid scale resource that will be interconnected to the CAISO system, it's going to need an operating agreement to illustrate how it's going to be operated in the market. So next slide, Chris. Contract counsel, Mr. Kevin Fox, came up with a series of graphics, and this was one of them that just tries to explain, generally speaking, how these contract structures will relate to each other. So in the contrast to a normal PPA type structure, we have the project, you have the CCA, and then you obviously have the CCA customers. Here you have CC Power, which has the direct contractual privity for the most part with the project developer. And then you have the project agreement to the right of that, that has the how the members and CC Power are going to interact with each other to make sure that we all fulfill our obligations under the project. And then as we go, I think most notably upward in time here, we're going to have an operating agreement, which will talk about how it will be bid and operated into the market, and be affected by a lot of market rules as well as regulatory considerations, which will change quite a bit from time to time over the life of the project. And the ISO rules, of course, require a scheduling coordinator for such resources. So a scheduling coordinator agreement, which is normally a fairly pro forma matter, will be for the project as well. So that's the basic overall commercial structure. Next slide, Chris. So let's get into, I think you all know that. Here's where we think, what we're thinking about as far as providing the notice required under the Joint Powers Agreement. We're looking at the first week of October for a special meeting. We had tentatively sketched out the 5th of October. The public documents that we are thinking about right now, obviously a presentation which thoroughly describes the process leading up to the recommendations and the requested notice. And as you all know, the Project Oversight Committee has been meeting for months and has done an extraordinary thorough job assessing options, and used very sophisticated analytics for these projects, which are not simple and certainly a lot different than a traditional PPA. A physical description of the project, including the party, the location, the technology, whether or not it has a PLA, and that requirement is in the energy storage services agreement, and the commercial operations date. And then additionally, the identity of the project participant members, their shares, and the relation to the regulatory allocations. We have vetted some of this information and the commercial sensitivity of it with the POC. That's an evolving discussion. So far, we haven't had any reaction from the POC as to any concerns in that regard. And so specifically what we would be asking the commission, the board to do is to provide notice that we're going to act no earlier than 60 days to take a possible approval of the contracts, and those will be specific contracts at that juncture in time. So looking forward, if we had this meeting on the 5th of October, then it would be no earlier than that commensurate time in the first week of December. Next slide. We have already commenced calendaring a series of calls. The first thing on our to-do list that we're moments from nailing down is a call with member council to go over the process and making sure we're not getting tripped up by unexpected approval items that we're going to need at the member level, and just get their general thoughts and concerns. That we hope to have that happen within a week or so. Then we would be following up with member council for an overview of the basic commercial terms, and would likely bring in lead counsel on the project and project experts to go over and help with that briefing. We should have fairly finalized commercial documents in this in late September, and so we'll be working with members to obviously get a full vetting of those documents to make sure we have an informed decision. Next slide, please. So here's the lawyers and Chris's first attempt at trying to reduce this process flow to a graphic. Starting where we are right now, it doesn't obviously go all the way back to the beginning of the POC process, which it could for sake of completeness. What we're talking about here right now, the notice in the first week of October, I think a lot of this is duplicative of just what we went over, but I would note that, you know, there is certainly an opportunity here. We're not counting on it, but there's certainly an opportunity for some of the member individual processes, whether those be informational briefings, if you have advisory boards, those can commence before we are seeking, approval of the documents in the first week of December from the CC Power Board. So we'll work to fine tune this, but just note, I think my takeaway is as we get towards the latter part of November and first part of December, we can, there is a chance to be efficient here and do informational briefings that at a member level that would precede the CC Power Board action. And then at the final arrow there, what we're getting as feedback from members is that there are members that are planning on acting in early to mid-February to try to seek member approval of the project participation agreement and other relevant documents. And so that's what that last arrow at the bottom represents.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on that. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Can you just say a little more about the vote by the CC Power Board in the first week of December as distinct from individual members approving the project participation? So can you say a bit about that vote?
So the documents that will be before the boards are the documents that are to which CC Power is a party. So the energy storage services agreement, the project participation agreement, and then within that energy storage services agreement is the BLIPTA, which is the guarantee which runs between the member and the developer.
So just a clarifying question on that.
Sir.
Is it the CC Power Board who's voting, or is it the participating members to the project?
Brittany, you want to chime in on that? The board, I believe, but Brittany's going to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, the way we have it laid out in the JPA is that all of the entire board would vote on the project. It's possible for us to approve a policy that has it just be the members if we want to, but as it stands right now, it is the entire board.
So I don't have an issue with that, but I could imagine in the future someone might. So let's just tag that unless another member has an issue, but maybe you come back to that before we run into a wall at some point where there's, for example, some members who really don't want to see a project happen and others who do. We may want to resolve that in advance. I'm not anticipating that, but thanks.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent observation. I mean, I know there are JPAs that do projects with one member, and so it gets awkward. And then the members will have the guarantee agreement and the project participation agreement that are needed at this juncture in time. I think that's our expectation as far as what the member approval process is. And if we go to the next slide, Chris, you'll see here the way we've structured these. They won't be effective until all the project participant members have executed. So even though CC Power Board is going first, that's not a binding agreement upon CC Power. It still is dependent on the condition precedent of the member execution of the relevant agreements to make it fully binding. A key to understanding what the members are going to have to do, there is always the possibility that one of the members that intends to be a project participant fails to get approval from its governing body. So we're going to work with the members, and we've discussed this with the POC, and we've had concurrence to date, that we build into the approval process a little bit of extra headroom on the megawatts. And we've done the math, and it still is roughly equivalent to the regulatory obligations for the long duration storage. So if we just hypothetically, and don't expect it to happen, assumed lack of approval for the largest member, and then we reallocate those few megawatts across the remaining project participants, we're going to be asking all the members to seek that slightly higher level, just in case we have one failure of approval at an individual member level. And then again, to repeat, because I probably didn't get it out very clearly, the work by the project team, it still leaves everyone very, very close to the regulatory obligations under the PUC order. So it was another reason, I think, to move forward on an incremental basis here with this first project. And we're, learn, what we get out of this project and what we have left to fulfill as far as our obligations. So then there'll be very important informational materials that will be publicly available. And so we will work with the members and your staff to make sure that that's organized in a way, including perhaps some common presentation materials and things like that. And the POC and some of your staff's already working on those matters. And the final slide, Chris. I think we might have gone over this already. First week of December, agreements won't be binding until we have an approved project agreement among the participants in CC Power. And February 2022 is what our current expectation is as far as where that is it. And the developers know this, and they're aware of this timeline.
All right, Tony, thank you very much. Why don't we open it up for questions by the board, then we'll go to public comment and then bring it back to the board. Any members of the board have questions of Tony? Jan?
Thanks, Garish. Thank you, Tony, for the presentation. I'm trying to understand exactly what the timing is, when we're going to get information. I guess if you had a flow chart with red arrows and little boxes in it, and it looked like the actual commercial documents are not okay. So it says now to mid-November, preparation of final commercial documents. And then it sounds like the ESSA, the project participation agreement, the operating agreements will not be ready until mid-November. Is that right?
Actually, I think that's a really good question, Director Pepper. I think that graphic could be clearer. So we are anticipating that near final documents should be ready as early as the end of this month.
Okay.
Obviously, they contain quite a bit of commercially sensitive information, and they're near final. So those distributions will happen as those documents, to the members. They won't be provided in the notice information because they still contain commercially sensitive information and they are not final, but we will be getting the information out. I apologize for being slightly vague because I think there's a little wiggle room on what, when we think, hey, these are as firm as they're going to get. And so that they're helpful and people can, people are already familiar with their terms. It's just a matter of, I think, doing that final review. What I meant by that slide, by that box, which I do think requires some clarification, is that, we're going to start a process to prepare for that December board meeting to consider and possibly approve the contracts. And we're going to have a pens down period. And obviously that pens down timing depends somewhat on when that, so if we do a dispersal by late September, early November, early October for the members, what I was trying to communicate there is there's a pens down period that's probably early to mid-November for, where it just can't accommodate revisions anymore.
Okay. And then the box commencement of member communications to individual boards, mid-November to end of year. I guess, for my vote at the CC Power Board in December, I feel that I need to get approval. I need to bring this to my governing board first before I can vote on that. I need to get their agreement to make this vote. And whether or not whether CC Power should do this project, and then also whether PCE should continue to go forward in the project. So I'm just trying to make sure that this schedule provides sufficient information for me to be able to go to my board, and that the timing is such, and it's not clear to me that the timing works on all of that.
So let's follow up on that. That's one of the things that we're trying to run to ground when we have the meeting with general counsels early next week, is understanding everyone's individual needs as far as what supporting documentation. So we are anticipating that just hypothetically, we have near final documents October 1. That we would be, that each individual member would be using whatever processes they use. So for example, if you have a risk oversight committee, we're anticipating that those types of vehicles would be used with as far as each individual member's activities. So let's follow up on that and make sure we're getting you what you need in a manner that meets your timeline.
Okay.
Next, thank you, Jan. Next up is San Francisco, Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. And Tony, I think, my questions were around similar to what Jan was addressing. And I think the public information that will be available at this special meeting you're talking about, I think you said October 5th is what you're thinking of. That'll be information that we can share publicly. So I'll be able to take it to my Citizens Advisory Committee and such as we start to prepare for, all of these approvals. And we have a practice often of providing our commission and our governing boards, both our commission and our Board of Supervisors, with the actual contracts. And I understand that is anticipated in this workflow you're showing us, right?
So let's break that down a little bit. And this is I think it's kind of like job one, right? Is not every one of the members' practices in this regard are identical. And certainly, if you just take this to a broader public power perspective, a lot of variation. So many most of the members, based on my understanding, almost all take full documents to the Risk Oversight Committee or other non-Brown Act bodies. And so what we're trying to drill down is understanding each of the members' processes. So we are fully anticipating that would occur, which what we're still trying to nail down is, are there members that bring items such as price to their Brown Act, Brown acted bodies within their organizations prior to approval. And my understanding from the POC and others is that the predominant practice is no. So.
Yeah, and sorry, I don't mean to be confusing what you've already learned from us, but we don't bring commercially sensitive information, but we do need to be able to explain, so the financial obligations and such. And so that kind of information we do provide. And I think in that workflow, you were saying that level of information would be substantially in its final form in that mid-November timeframe. Is that what you said?
Earlier than that. No, I think that'll be
a little earlier.
Yes, it'll be available.
Okay.
Could very well be available early October.
Okay. Thank you.
So, it just goes back to my earlier theme. Certain issues occur to me, so that in addition to the processes, this can be we're going to be a learning, as this is our first project here. What members individually view as commercially sensitive. Price would be an obvious example, but credit terms and things like that would be another potential example. So we need to have that discussion amongst the membership.
Any other questions from the board? I don't see any. I'm now going to move to the public to see if there are any comments the public may have on this. Seeing none, come back. There really isn't a decision. It's only information that we are providing. Thank you for the questions, both Jan and Barbara. We will follow up on that. And also want to acknowledge all your staff who have worked on the Project Oversight Committee. It's been a pretty amazing process and just super work that's been done by all your staff. So we'll now move to item 6C, which is to consider and possibly approve resolution 10 related to a request for offers for firm clean energy resources. It's going to be interim general manager Tim Haynes and Jean Soleil from San Jose are handling this. I'll hand it over to Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution also would authorize that once the RFO is issued, to begin the evaluation of the responses through the shortlisting phase of the contracting effort that we have. Jean Soleil will get into that specifically in the presentation that she's provided. We come to you today because this is a project that has been brought to CC Power by the membership. It is the result of a mandate from the Public Utility Commission, and the membership is interested in being able to work collectively in order to be able to reach out to the market and assess the opportunities of being able to meet the regulatory mandate. Timing is an issue that we're trying to address, And so we're seeking the authority to issue the RFO within the next 30 days. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jean Zalay. And I would just add that Jean will act as the lead amongst the member agencies in developing the RFO, taking us through the analytical process, and then further into the negotiations and contract approval process, which we will come back to the board on at a later time. But just wanted to let you know that we're taking an approach that is similar to what had been done with the long duration storage. This is a member-driven effort, and so Jean is going to be able to walk you through what it is that lies ahead if you so authorize us to issue this RFO.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this project with you. Basically, this is currently a project that's supported by all members. Chris, if you could go to the next slide, please. I have a little presentation here that basically focuses on the purpose, the participation and roles, the process and timeline, and then some lessons learned from the long duration storage effort, which we're hoping to take advantage of in this subsequent process. Next slide, please. So the purpose, basically what we're asking is that you allow us to release a request for offers for firm, clean resources. And as Tim noted, for authority to go ahead and assess the responses and propose to you a short list. The reason for that is the same decision that requires us to buy a certain quantity of long duration storage requires load serving entities to procure by 2026 what the CPUC call firm clean resources. Basically, those firm clean resources are new resources that have an 80% capacity factor and are either zero emission resources or they qualify as California RPS resources. So that's what a firm clean resources. They need to be online by 2026. There is an ability to justify a delay through 2028, but we have to show that we made efforts to bring this supply online by 2026. Generally, firm clean resources could be something like geothermal power or biomass power. Those are two resources that would likely qualify under the CPUC's decision. And based on what the CPUC requires each of the load serving entities that's interested in participating in this effort with us, we're targeting a capacity of about 200 megawatts. Next slide, please. So there are going to be, as there were in the case of the long duration storage, there are going to be two phases of this. Phase one is the phase that we're bringing to you at this time. And based on conversations with staff, it appears that all CC Power members are interested in participating in phase one. The important thing about phase one, and I'll cover it in the next slide, is we're not asking the board to approve any money for phase one. We're hoping that we can do phase one through a combination of sweat equity and certain members having stepped up and said that they would make a limited amount of consultants that they already contract with available to the group without reimbursement. At the moment, 4 entities have already stepped up to volunteer to contribute to this effort. We're hoping that a few more members will contribute as well, but the 4 members that have stepped up already include ourselves, San Jose Clean Energy. As Tim said, I will coordinate the effort. We will prepare an RFO document and a term sheet, which of course we will run by the Project Oversight Committee and make sure that everybody's comfortable with before we issue it. We would coordinate issuance of the RFO, and we're also willing to provide some assistance from an attorney that we would fund to review the term sheet before it's issued. Sonoma Clean Power has offered to co-coordinate with myself and also to act as quality control. So they will be, in addition to all parties, of course, reviewing all the documents and making sure that they are comfortable with the documents. Sonoma Clean Power has stepped up to offer to review the documents that we prepare in more detail and act as our quality control person, both for the RFO document, the draft term sheet, the RFP bid spreadsheet. And in addition, Sonoma Clean Power has offered to undertake an economic analysis of the RFO responses. East Bay has offered to prepare the RFO bid spreadsheet and to undertake an economic analysis of the RFO responses. That means that 2 separate entities have offered to do this. We're still working out exactly how that's going to be done. One possibility that we've discussed is that each entity will undertake an economic analysis of the RFO responses, and then we'll compare those results and make sure that that gives us a more robust basis to make our selections. East Bay is putting into place for themselves a pretty sophisticated RFO process whereby the bid spreadsheets can feed directly into their economic analysis tool. And so we're going to be using their spreadsheet, and Sonoma Clean Power has generously agreed to work with the spreadsheet that East Bay pulls together to undertake their economic analysis. I expect that other CCAs will participate in a review of respondents, looking at things, for example, like the experience of folks who bid in, their financial strength, and other, environmental impacts, labor proposals. So I'm not saying that these will be the only people who will participate in reviewing the responses, but the economic analysis is of course one of the most detailed analyses that needs to be done. We'll also, part of the reason why we're not asking for money for this particular phase is because our thinking is firm clean resources, as I mentioned, it's likely to be geothermal resources, biomass resources, and it's unlikely that they'll require the type of very sophisticated economic analysis that was necessary for the long duration storage. Sonoma Clean Power, East Bay, and in fact, the rest of us routinely issue RFPs and have increasingly built up their own internal capability to undertake this type of analysis. We're not expecting that this is going to be particularly challenging, and therefore, in the hopes of, number one, getting this done faster and cheaper, and learning from our past experience, to use internal resources, sweat equity, as it were. There is one aspect that we think might be a little bit more challenging for these types of resources, and that is interconnection and transmission issues. You might all be aware that interconnection is becoming increasingly problematic as the CPUC and CCAs indicate a great interest in accelerating and adding projects in California. And so Silicon Valley has agreed to make available to the team as we undertake our review of bid responses, folks with expertise on those types of issues so that they can advise the group of people who are reviewing the bids and provide any type of expert assessment that might be needed for that. In addition, this consultant would review the RFO response spreadsheet to make sure that that it meets everybody's needs. So that's the proposal in terms of who is more actively participating. As I said, everybody seems to be interested in participating in phase one. 4 CCAs has stepped up to make sizable contributions to the efforts, and we're hoping and expecting that some additional CCAs will step up and help in the shortlisting process. Next slide, please. So this is basically our current, this is the current project approval process that we, that's been approved by CC Power. Generally, there's a phase 0, which is a project conceptualization. That's already been done. A group of us discussed this mandate. Monica surveyed participants' staff to identify what next phase might, or what next RFO might be of interest to members. We identified that firm clean resources seemed to be something that people thought it would be useful to work together. There's not a lot of new geothermal in California. And our thinking was that that is a place where working together we'd be in a better position to potentially really provide the buying power to get some really good projects launched, which is what we're going to need. And in addition, there's been some conversation about how we would go about getting this off the ground before we get to a point where we're asking the board for a cost sharing agreement, and that's what resulted in the arrangement that I showed before. We're now in phase 1 where we're detailing the scope, developing RFO documents, coming up with the scoring rubrics and our plan for scoring responses when we get them. We would like to, if we get your approval today, we will set up a project advisory committee to advise the GM on going forward with this effort. My hope is, at least initially, to have POC meetings every other week, since I know that it will likely be similar folks who already participate in the POC for long duration storage, and we want to minimize the using up those valuable resources, but we will be going forward to get that going. And then as we continue to work through the process and do our shortlisting, we will come up with a budget. We will propose a budget for phase 2, which would be where we actually get into negotiating with shortlisted projects. So our expectation is we will issue the RFP, we will evaluate the RFP responses, we will come to you with a shortlisting proposal and a budget and proposed cost sharing agreement for phase 2. Phase 2 would be the development of the actual agreements. And for phase 2, it's our thinking that it makes sense to hire a couple of experts so that these experts really represent the entire community. I expect those experts to rely pretty heavily on some of the documents and approaches that have been developed for the long duration storage. So hopefully it'll be a considerably more economic budget than what was needed for the long duration storage, where it was a new type of resource. And we were also setting up and having to work through all of these issues. And then finally, if we get through that successfully, we will come to you to seek your approval for specific projects and agreements. Next slide, please. I guess I anticipated this a little bit, but just to make it absolutely clear, the slide 6 was more of the general process. This is showing you how the process will work. In this case, phase 1 will be undertaken using sweat equity and contributions by specific interested CCAs. We'll create a project oversight committee. We will issue an RFP, including any board adopted procurement policies, which I know are of particular interest to many of our supporters. We will evaluate and shortlist winning bidders. We will develop a budget and cost sharing agreement for phase 2. And then once we get board approval for phase 2, we'll start working on hiring consultants to undertake phase 2. Phase 2 will be negotiating actual agreements with shortlisted bidders. We expect the same types of agreements. There'll be a power purchase agreement, standard industry agreements. We will use the same credit and collateral approach that we're using for the long duration storage, and have a buyer liability pass-through agreement that gives the developer recourse to the individual members who are the ones who have the customers. There'll be a participation agreement between CC Power and the participating members. And then there'll be an operating agreement between CC Power and participating members. And as in the case of long duration storage, the power purchase agreement would be between the developer and CC Power, and then the buyer liability pass-through agreement brings that all together and is signed by all parties. And then once those agreements are in place, we will seek your approval for those agreements and then proceed with agreement execution. Next slide, please. In terms of the timing, we've already started work, so we're hopeful that if you approve this today, we will be able to get an RFO issued in the middle of October. We'll give people a couple of months to respond, so we're giving them until mid-December to respond. I will point out, just so nobody's surprised, the first solicitation will not have the RFO spreadsheet included, because that's going to be developed beginning in November. You might know CCAs, the procurement staff of CCAs at this time of year tends to be extremely taken up with meeting our RA requirements, given that the annual RA filing is at the end of October. The RFO documents are close to being done, so we can get those out, have folks start thinking about it, start considering what they might be interested in providing to us. And then we'll give them the spreadsheet to fill out mid-November. They'll have a whole month to figure that out. And we're expecting submittals mid-December. Then we expect that we would be evaluating, ranking, and selecting proposals by mid-February. Maybe we can do it a little faster, but particularly given the holidays, we thought that mid-February at least was definitely very reasonable, and then give ourselves a couple of months of contract negotiations. At that point, only the people who are interested in the shortlisted folks that we identify will probably want to participate in the cost sharing agreement and the cost of hiring those experts to do the contract negotiation. And then we expect that contract execution and approval and all that would be done by the middle of next year. Last slide, please. Finally, I want to stress that, you know, we are looking closely at the effort that we did, the LDS effort. We think it was a very good effort. Obviously, it took some time because we were developing a lot of things, but we're looking to learn from that effort so that we can do it faster and cheaper, and also so that we improve on our performance. One of the lessons learned that, you know, we had a session where we discussed some of the lessons learned, and some of the recommendations were to have some quality control, which is why I appreciate Sonoma stepping up to take that role, and already they've provided a lot of very valuable input. There was a suggestion that technical evaluators should review the bid form, and East Bay is going to provide that bid form, and Sonoma Clean Power will review it, as well as some technical support. And then finally, we expect to benefit from the significant input, the significant effort undertaken to figure out a credit and collateral approach that was acceptable to ourselves and counterparties, which is probably one of the most difficult things that we had to work for purposes of the LDS. Hopefully, if we find that that all works well for the LDS, it should work for the Firm Clean Resources. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Let me open it up to the board for questions. Then we go to the public for comments, and then come back for action because we do have a requested action here. So we'll start with Peninsula and Jan Pepper.
Thanks, Girish. Thank you, John, for going through this whole process. And I think we just received a draft of the RFO earlier this week or late last week. One thing that I was concerned about was that the labor and environmental related issues are not included in the RFO. And if there's any lesson we learned from last time, is to have that be upfront so that the bids that we receive reflect the labor policies that we want to see implemented in this. So I'm a little concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse again, possibly, and rushing this through before we've really made sure that all the lessons learned from the LDS project are being considered before we get out this RFO. I understand, you know, that we want to get it out quickly, but I also want to make sure that we do it right this time and that we don't run into the issues that we've had for the LDS project.
Yeah, and I'll just stress that we understand that's important. It had been my expectation that it was going to be addressed by the board in this meeting, but I totally agree that we should wait for the board to take up that issue and make sure that it's part of our RFO documents.
So let me just jump in here a little bit. I think we want to move quickly on this, and I think we can give our staff direction at this meeting by basically discussing. I think if we apply the LDS policies to this, that'll allow staff to move forward with this. So, and I looked at the resolution, I've talked to General Counsel, and with the current resolution as drafted, as long as we as a board discuss it and provide direction, this current resolution will work, and the RFO will include the requirements that we imposed on ourselves for the LDS project. Tony, would you like to add anything else on that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, with the direction from the board, which we have here and will be reflected in minutes and in the recording, and with the way that the resolution is worded currently, we think that the the team will proceed with the issuance, incorporating the requirements of the LDS project as directed by the board.
Where does it say that in the resolution?
The reference to the supporting materials, and then also the direction that you're giving right now to do so, and the understanding of the POC and its own internal deliberations, which we're putting on the record right now.
Okay, I guess when I looked at the resolution, it mentioned supporting materials included and attached to this item. I didn't see any supporting materials attached to the resolution in the board packet.
I think, Jan, there's another section.
Later.
I think it's another phrase of the same section 2 of the resolution, which talks about criteria the POC would use. So I think we've got this particular point. I think we can solve it by just all of us, if we're all in agreement that the LDS policies would apply to this RFO, I think that would be sufficient direction. However, if we want to be explicit in the resolution, we can edit the resolution to add that phrase in too. But from what Tony tells me, just our discussion around it will serve the purpose.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood what you just said about the supporting documents, which I didn't see. And am I missing something, or is that the staff report that goes with it? I'm sorry, I don't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the supporting documents. It essentially says using criteria created by and in consultation with the members of and the Firm Clean Energy Project Oversight Committee. So the members would be us. So if we basically provide direction here, Jan, that as part of this resolution, we say, yep, we can vote for this resolution, but make sure that the LDS project specifications are applied to this project. I think that would be sufficient, but I'll ask Tony and Brittany to see if you can point to the particular resolution language to answer Jan's questions.
So I guess my question is, I think we're committing to do so right now, and that was the intent of the POC, and it's on the record. So I guess the question is that adequate? Is that commitment, which is going to be memorialized on the record here, adequate to move forward?
Well, I guess my concern is I'm being asked to vote on a resolution that references supporting material that is attached to this item, and I don't see that supporting material. And the thing that you're referencing, Garish, is for the evaluation of the proposals after that comes in. Item 1 is to issue the RFO. And so I don't see the supporting materials that talk about what's in the RFO.
Yeah, the supporting materials refers to what was in the packet with this item. So I believe it was a memo, and then just the project process. And then when we talk about the LDS policies, that is coming in through the direction of the board at this meeting. Does that help clarify?
Okay.
Let me ask additional comments from.
I have another question. Sorry.
Okay.
And then the other question I had was about the costs. So we've been asked to provide some cost sharing for this project. I'm trying to find my notes, sorry. And I guess I wanted to get a little clarification on what we thought the costs would be, because there isn't a budget defined yet. So we've been asked to contribute a certain number of dollars towards consultants. And I just want to make sure that we know kind of what we're getting into? Is there going to be another ask? Have others been asked? What is the total amount that we're looking at here? Again, it's a little undefined. And maybe others understand this, but I'm sorry if I'm being dense here.
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
We've developed some preliminary estimates as to what the project is going to cost. I'm a little uncomfortable in sharing the specific numbers that we have at this point in time, but it goes back to the last slide that Jean had provided in her presentation. And that is that we've learned lessons as a result of the first phase, and they come in the form of being able to streamline the RFP process, the evaluation process, but perhaps more importantly, it comes in the form of being able to apply the credit and collateral provisions. The long duration storage project came in at around $500,000, and that was budgeted over 10 months. What we're expecting here is a process that's going to be about 7 months. And so that's just one example of where it is that we'll see cost savings, but in terms of the amount of time that's going to take. But the other is leveraging what it is that we had developed with the credit and collateral provision. And we're expecting that we'll see some substantial savings as a result of that. I hesitate, as I said, to put a specific number on it at this point. And so what we do intend to do, though, is as we proceed into the 2022 budget process, we will provide the complete and detailed estimate of what it will take to take the project through contracting. And with that, what we'll have is the complete answer to the question that you're asking right now. I also want to point to another point, another aspect to the slide presentation that John had provided, and that would be slide number 6. And what it says is that in phase 1, the second bullet, that this process is going to allow for the issuance of the RFP, but it will include the board procurement policies. And so, so this goes to, I think, the last question that you had asked, and we do in the supporting material provide specific reference to the RFO, including the board procurement policies. And in this case, with the board not approving the recommendation earlier, in not having a chance to approve the recommendation earlier, the procurement policies that would apply would be those that had applied to the long duration storage project.
Thank you, Tim. So before let's move on to see if anyone else from the board has any questions or comments. Okay, before we finish this, I want to make sure that, Jan, we answered your question. So has your question been answered?
I guess kind of. I guess my question wasn't necessarily around the full cost of the project, but really how much sweat equity we're going to be asked to put in. So we've been asked to put in a certain amount. And my question is there going to be more? And so that's really it. And I know that others put it in for the LDS project, and maybe we didn't. That's really the questions during this sweat equity phase.
Jan, let me answer. The way we are looking at this is no cost on phase one. And yes, there's substantial sweat equity that will be put in by San Jose, Sonoma, East Bay, and us. And so I think the POC has been really, really good in allocating work and participation. Last year, obviously, some members did a lot more than others. And I think there's a little bit of rebalancing going on. So the idea here is no cost for phase one. It's going to be sweat equity. And I think Jean has laid out what it's going to take, including work around evaluating proposals. So I don't think it's 100% defined, but I think the POC, as I understand it right now, the directors are quite comfortable they can get it done at no cost for phase one. All right, let's go to the public. Ask if there are any comments on this item before we bring it back to the board. We have one speaker, Rick Berennier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and board members. I want to ask that in the future, for the public's benefit, because we're paying close attention, as you can tell, that perhaps the agenda includes some reports which clarify exactly what things like firm clean energy are, and more details about how we intend to go about doing what we're doing right now. I think many members of the public, not being intimately familiar with all of the language and jargon that's being used, could benefit from some clarification. And additionally, regarding the materials that I heard were attached to the agenda for the board members, I've come to grow quite fond of being able to sing things like a resolution that is being proposed. I think it would be good to attach resolutions to the agenda so the public can look and be able to form opinions and make comments, possibly written comments, but at least spoken comments in an informed way after preparing for the board meeting. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chairman, point of clarification on this item, the packet that went out to the board and was noticed with the agenda included the resolutions on this item and the various memos that were presented.
Yes, I'm taking the public comment as a compliment, Tony. So I don't see any other comment from the public. So we'll bring it back to the board. We have a resolution in front of us. So I'm looking for either more questions, or if the board is good with the board member making a motion, I'd entertain that. San Francisco, Barbara.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to say thank you to Director Pepper for raising the issue. I think we had a good about incorporation of our policies on rates, environment, and workforce. I want to thank the interim general manager for including the materials in the packet as he did. For someone like me who came in late, it was really helpful to have that packet that describes the process flow for projects, because I wasn't part of the team when that was adopted. So thank you for that. It's my understanding from this conversation that we'll include the long duration storage language in the RFO that that San Jose Clean Energy is taking the leadership on drafting. And I know Jean Soleil is here and listening to all of this direction, and I'm confident we'll have an RFO that addresses these issues properly. And with that, I'd like to move for the adoption of the resolution as drafted.
I would like to second the motion. This is Nick Chassett.
So we have San Francisco and East Bay with the motion and second. Any discussion by board members? Not seeing any. Brittany, could you please conduct the vote?
Thank you. Central Coast Community Energy absent. Clean Power San Francisco,
Yes.
East Bay Community Energy,
Yes.
Marin Clean Energy,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
The resolution passes. Thank you.
Thank you, board members. We now have the last item on our agenda. Any individual items, member items that you want to bring up for the good of the order? San Francisco, Barbara.
Thank you. I was hoping, Chair, you or the interim GM could respond to a question I have about public participation. Does CC Power maintain an email list or a subscription list? How are we effectively reaching out to members of the public? I'm hearing concern expressed in public comment about transparency. I know we have our agendas published on our website. I'm wondering if we do any pushing out of that information or if it's a self-serve kind of approach we're taking.
It's mostly self-serve. This organization is essentially, the way I see it, we implement what each of us want to do, right? And we are running on a half a shoestring budget with a lot of sweat equity, which is kind of the way we wanted to do it when we were formed. We didn't want to add overhead. So all meetings are noticed in the right amount of time. It's all on the website. We have recordings of our meetings on the website. And every one of us could push information out to our channels using whatever form we have. But that's kind of the state of where we are right now. Go ahead, Tony.
Obviously, there are requirements that we distribute materials for those that specifically ask. And so we do that, and we have a few members of the public that receive those materials when you do.
And if I may add, there is a subscription link on the website. So anyone who subscribes gets the information automatically. They just have to subscribe once, and then they are on the list for all future agenda packets.
Thank you for that review.
Okay, next up is Jeff.
Just wanted to share because we're just going out with an RFO for firm clean resources. I just wanted to share that Sonoma Clean Power has a local area initiative working with Lake Sonoma and Mendocino counties to explore very low water input geothermal and other novel technologies that would allow geothermal to be built in areas outside of the traditional zones. And as part of that, we are taking a look at transmission constraints in Northern California. And so there's no PPA on the street, and I don't expect this to overlap with CC Power's procurement at all. But I did want to disclose it just in case throughout this process, we do encounter a situation where our exploration of transmission or some other facet has an overlap. So I'll be making sure my team is closely coordinating and disclosing what we're doing to the folks working on this at CC Power, just in case, to avoid any potential conflicts. And should even a question of one arise, I'll bring that to the board and we can talk it through. I expect because of the novel nature of the technology and the timeline, it won't, but I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Jeff, thank you so much. Matthew, Redwood Coast.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on Jeff's comment that, you know, the efforts up here to look at offshore wind and figuring out the transmission constraints in our area. You know, one could look at a map and say, transmission from Humboldt County, if it's going over land, would cross through the area Jeff just mentioned. And so, you know, there may be sort of overlapping interests in figuring out how to get both offshore wind and geothermal out of the rural North Coast region to the rest of the state. So sort of ditto what Jeff said.
Super exciting stuff, this clean energy transition. Awesome. I don't see any other board members' hands up. So with that, we will adjourn this meeting at 2:41. Thank you all.